Hi, Journey Church. I want to wish you a happy new year. But today I'm going to do actually a two-part series, and it's titled Sitting at the Feet of God. But let me remind you this. We live in a broken world, and we want life to work smooth. And one solution maybe would be to, find a shack up in the desert somewhere and get off the grid and just isolate ourselves. But there's one problem with that, and I think it's this. Is that what God wants? So here in the beginning of 23, I want to throw a challenge at us. And what if this year began with a spiritual posture, a posture of sitting at the feet of God? Now, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor actually that's used in the scriptures over and over again. David actually wrote this of sitting in the company of mockers. You think of sitting with mockers versus sitting before God. Two completely different metaphors and meanings. But the question for us, what will be our spiritual posture or our attitude as we approach our relationship with God in 2023? Maybe this is the year that God wants to get our attention. And I'm confident of this. God is inviting us to learn, to grow, to trust, frankly, to be changed here in 2023. Now, to begin, I have a granddaughter, age 3, and she is figuring out life. She's learning to live in her world. And matter of fact, a couple of years ago, when you think of learning, she learned to pull herself up. She learned to stand. She had to figure out and learn those first steps. And then she had to learn to fall. But then she began to learn to walk and then run. And now she's learning to take risks. Now, fast forward with her just a few years, she still needs to be taught. I think of the alphabet before she can go to school and read. She needs to learn her numbers before she can get that first iPhone, okay? But think about the things she has to learn even as she relates to people. Even with her mom and dad, you think about the word submission or even authority. Now catch this. At the same time, she has a nature that actually opposes that kind of authority. Now she is really cute, but already has a flesh, has an inside voice that's saying, I can do what I want. On the inside, mom and dad, you can tell me what to do, but you can't tell me what to think. See, recognize with that little girl, there is a character quality that is missing. This missing character quality impacts her learning and all her relationships. See, that little girl was born into a world without this character trait, and this character trait really is one word. It's the word humility. She is now living in a world without humility, and she's learning to relate without humility. See, a person born does not start off being humble. We actually start off being number one in our lives. So Meredith here, that's her name. She's the most important thing in her universe. And her posture toward God is this right now. Her back is turned. She's not sitting at his feet. Now understand, one day, Meredith will have to move toward humility in order to relate to people, her siblings, her parents, her Sunday school teachers, her school teachers. But you got to catch this. The issue of humility will be faced on the day that she decides what her relationship with God will look like. Sitting at the feet of God, see, is about a spiritual posture of having humility before God. But when humility is absent, relationships will always be challenged. And matter of fact, humility, the level of humility is actually revealed through our relationships. But see the question, what is our spiritual posture as we approach God in 2023? Does it include humility? Are we spiritually sitting at the feet of God, and are we gazing up at him? Or are we sort of closed off to his presence? Maybe we're on our phone, or we're distracted by other stuff, or maybe our spiritual posture is we're standing a long way off from God. Or maybe we have our back turned to Him right now. Maybe we're angry at Him in some way. See the question? Do we have a spiritual posture of humility? A willingness to sit at the feet of God and gaze upward to learn. See, this posture of humility is deeply important. There's a theologian by the name of Augustine, and he wrote about humility. Now I want to give you a quote. He said this: "Humility is the foundation of all the other virtues. Hence, in the soul in which this virtue does not exist, there cannot be any other virtue." He is spot on, and especially toward God. Why would Augustine say humility is the virtue of virtues? Now, hear this. Without humility, you cannot and will not love. Love will curve into the self. No humility, one will not forgive. One cannot be reconciled without humility. Listen to this. One cannot worship without humility. It will be false and fake worship. I don't care how much we feel, how much we raise our hands, without humility, there is no worship. Listen to another one. One cannot be saved without it. If one will not humble themselves before God, salvation cannot occur. See, humility is of utmost importance in the economy of God. Being willing to humble ourselves is vital to every relationship, especially with God. Let me read a passage, and it's so deeply connected to this issue of humility. It surrounds actually the dedication of the temple by Solomon. God's giving an answer to a prayer request. And in that answer, God invites Israel, his people, to a spiritual posture of humility. This is 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 12. "Then the Lord appeared to Solomon in the night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command the locusts to devour the land, or send pestilence among my people, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land." That verse 14, if my people, you realize this is written to God's people. We often use it in the context of our country. This isn't written to nations. This context is written to God's people. Now, notice the key issue: to humble themselves first. Now, here's where we got to catch this, because humility is the genesis to prayer, to be seeking God. Humility is the starting point of turning away from sin. See, are we catching the importance of this posture of humility in our spiritual lives? See, verse 14, if they humble, if we have a posture of humility in their relationships with God, then forgiveness. See, do we want God to be a part of our lives in 2023? Humility is the name of the game. And you go, how do we get there? See, you can't become humble by taking a seminar, doing a class. You can't go to a store and you can't buy a box of humility. You can't wake up and say, self, I'm going to be humble today and I'm going to be filled with humility. Immediately when you do that, when you try to decide that you're going to be humble, and this little song, remember, could jump into your head, oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. See, and at the same time, guys, God is inviting us to humble ourselves before Him in 2023. But maybe even stronger, He also demands humility in our relationship with Him. See, this spiritual posture of humility sets the tone of our relationship with God. Now, how does humility come about then in our lives? Next week, I would invite you back next week, and we're going to look at that issue. Have a great start to 2023. Think about this week, your posture with God. Blessings to you.